Okay, well, we were amending this agenda earlier today based on the feedback we got last night. So we'll go through real quick. As always, we'll cover the financial statements that came out earlier this week. I want to touch on the mid-biennial budget modification and kind of where we're at on that, as well as the property taxes, which will be on our Monday council agenda as well. As you know, today is auto pay day, so we won't have utility billing aging reports as part of this packet. And after this meeting, I'm leaving town until Monday, so we'll get those posted as soon as I'm back in the office on Monday.
All right.
Next meeting is the regular Thursday, November 18th at 10, so no changes to that one. So September financials are looking very good. I always do kind of a where are we at on surplus, and it actually grew a little bit. It's looking like it's about 1.5 million at the end of September, so that's good news. I know we'll be talking about possible spending of that as we progress through the budget modification discussions and ordinances. But all in all, the financial statements look really good. The revenue is still off the charts high as far as sales tax and hotel motel tax. Our real estate excise tax is also running very high due to all of the property stuff going on out here. So all in all, everything looks good. The only fund I continue to worry about is still the shared utility fund, which is still in the negative. And I did get feedback from MRSC on whether or not we can use the ARPA funding to plug that budget deficit, and they said we cannot. So as part of the budget amendment coming up, I will build some additional transfers from the EMS, water, sewer, and storm funds to make up that lost funding that we continue to lose until January of 2022. So it wasn't the news I wanted to hear, but I would rather know ahead of time that we can't do it before we did do it. So we'll just have to fix it a different way. Any questions on the financials?
I have a couple questions, okay. Angie.
Sure.
On the going back to the ARPA for utility to make the city whole, I thought I heard in one of the webinars I sat in on that it could be used to make people who are sort of suffering whole. And I'm wondering if that means to help them with their late payments rather than in general putting ARPA money into the shared utilities. Can we not help them with their late payments, and then as a result possibly that would make us put us in better shape?
Well, the problem with the late payments is those were never even added to the customer accounts. So the governor's moratorium said we cannot assess late fees and we cannot do shutoffs. And with shutoffs, there is a fee associated with getting your water turned back on. So those, and my argument to use the ARPA funding and the lost revenue was that was actually a revenue loss for us. That was never assessed on a customer's account. So that money is just gone. So we can, I believe, and Sarah and Scott have been working on that ARPA list to figure out what's allowable and what's not allowable. But I believe that the assistance you can offer is to help with their actual payments for service, but there were no late fees assessed. So it doesn't, they're not even on the accounts to collect at this point.
So that would be sort of if we could do the late to help them with their service, which is behind, then that would go through a grant type of a process that probably would be administered by the county, by, I think Greater Grace Harbor has that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
talked about Greater Grace Harbor, I believe, at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, so would we as a council need to vote to put a certain amount of money into that funding stream, let's call it?
Yeah. So
Okay.
how I would see that is as we go through the budget discussion at Monday's council meeting, I know that we're going to go through that ARPA list, which I believe the assistance to utility customers is on there. So that would be the time if council wants to do it to say, okay, yes, this is a priority and this is how much money we want to put towards that.
Okay. I have a couple other questions, but if Eric, if you have any questions, I'm happy to step aside for a bit.
Go ahead.
So the water bills came out and you had the bright flyer in there. Do you have a sort of, is there a way of getting a report of, or knowing how many customers have contacted the city to make plans for payment, to put themselves on a payment plan to catch up?
Yeah, last time I checked, it was only a handful. I think it's probably going to be the same thing the PUD experienced, was that until the enforcement action starts happening, we probably won't get a whole lot of people reaching out. Usually that's the trigger, is when their water goes off. That's when they're in here asking for help. So we're doing all that we can, but
Sure.
it's kind of up to them to, work out their stuff at this point. We gave them extra time, so.
Right. And that flyer will continue to come out in the bills, right?
Yep, through the
We're
first
on
of
a
the year.
different cycle, and if it's every 2 months, there may be people that haven't gotten the flyer yet. Is that right?
Yeah, it'll be in 4 months worth of bills. So every other month. So customers should at least get 2 of those before the shutoffs start. But I was gonna ask Scott and Sarah, have there been any media pushes like on the radio or Facebook or anything like that, that maybe that would be something we could use to try to get the word out as well?
We have not done that to date, and I think it's because I have not received a single kind of call or issue on it. And I think it's absolutely right. It's because it can be kicked down the road, and it's because as long as the water isn't turned off, no one's reaching out to us. But
Sure.
But I think you're right though, Angie. It's less. We're talking like less than 20 people, right? For the most part.
No. No.
Is it more than that?
Yeah, it's probably, I would say probably 100, 120.
Oh, okay. It is that high. I didn't realize it was that high, but I haven't received a single call on that issue. So
Yeah.
We currently just have it on your utility page for the website. We can take that and make a news brief out of it if you would like. What would be helpful is if the letter that you're sending out has any different information on it than what we put on the utility site, if we could use some of the language from that letter, if we could get a copy of that, that'd
Absolutely.
be super helpful. If I could go back and just ask a question on the ARPA funding for that, the money for the utility billing customers, does the council have to proclaim by motion that they want Greater Grace Harbor to facilitate that on the city's behalf?
My understanding is that the council would say, we want this much money to go towards this, and then city management would take it at that point and figure out what to do to make that happen.
I do have one question, Angie, because maybe I was mixed up on something. Of the customers that are laid on the 439 shared utility fund, how many of those are commercial and how many of those are individual? Are they all individual?
Mostly residential. The
Residential.
have been catching up because they've been receiving rescue funding. So most of them are actually caught up.
Okay.
A handful, but it's vastly the residential customers.
All right.
So it seems to me that anything we can do to get the word out besides the flyer, which I think is great, the City of Ocean Shores Facebook, a link on the webpage, maybe a blurb in the Greater Grays Harbor Inc. newsletter even. Any way we can get that information out, I think would be helpful for people.
Yep.
Even if they think, well, I'll wait till the last minute, you know, if we get 20 that don't wait till the last minute, that's a fifth or so of what it looks like that are behind, who are behind.
Yeah, we could even add a copy of that letter. I'll send it to Scott and Sarah, but we could add it to the finance committee section of the website. And if council members want to go out there and grab it and share it at your group meetings that you have,
Sure.
you know, anything just to get the word out, it doesn't hurt at all.
Might be a good one for conversation with council. Eric, I think you're doing that next time, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I'll drop
And
it
I-
during the city administrator report too.
And I'm sure that if you wanted some bright yellow copies, I'm sure Sarah could get you guys some to pick up from the clerk's office to hand out.
Yeah. So I have another question, and it comes up. I think I heard you say the ending balance, something about the ending balance. And when I went through the financial report, it looks to me like the ending balance dropped from August to September by about 180,000. And so it's at 3.8 million now, which is still pretty hefty. I'm wondering, I noticed in the last warrants report that there was $181,000 payment on the transportation benefit district. Is that, and I hadn't noticed those before. And by the way, Eric, thank you for signing warrants for me last week. I have to beg off again. I feel really bad for this coming week, but is that part of it, do you think?
The transportation benefit district payments would not come out of the general fund. So
That's right. You're right.
Yes. So Nick is splitting those between the street fund and the TBD fund. So it's just, you know, our revenues are always going up and down based on when property taxes are coming in and our peaks and valleys with sales tax and things like that. So, and yeah, we do have some big bills that come in occasionally too, that makes that kind of go up and down. But I think how I look at it is how far above and below target we are with revenues and expenses to come up where I calculate that surplus amount.
Right.
So I just use those ratios. And if you're looking at the summary in there, our revenues are 44%.
Right.
Target is only 36. So I take the difference and then come up with how much we're over at this particular point in time.
And that's generally what I look at, but I just wondered if there was one thing or one or two things that you could attribute that, because it's been continually going up. And then I noticed it dropped a little bit.
Yeah. Our property taxes are fluctuating right now too. So that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on financials?
I'm good.
All right. Okay. So this next page, the city staff budget request, is the one that we were working on this morning. So at yesterday's study session, we went through and staff presented their 2022 budget requests. And I went through and added dollar amounts because that was kind of the theme last night, was that you're trying to add staff, but how much does that cost? So those were added in here, and those will be added to the agenda for Monday's council meeting as well. I did change that radio board title because there was some confusion in the way that was worded. So I think Catherine, you're the one that came up with power upgrade. So that's what I used for that one. And then the computers, it seemed like there was a little confusion on that as well. So I just wanted to clarify that it's $1,000 for each one. It sounds like they would love to have two, but they can get by with one. So it'll be whatever council decides on that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now,
And
was
then-
not something, I thought, my last computer cost me about $500, so I thought they were gonna buy a couple, but it must be super duper.
Well, when you're,
It-
yeah, you need to get the software on it too. So
Yeah.
once you get the software and all that, it doubles the price pretty quick. You can get a
Yeah.
basic computer for $500, but you can't
And
get
I
one.
think Marty was being very conservative when he put 500. They did initially want two,
Right.
500 a piece, but once you, like Eric said, got everything on it, and after the council conversation, it was just very clear that it should be about $1,000 for each of them, so 2,000 in total.
Right.
Yeah, and I think based on what we
Oh,
purchasing,
2,000 total, he still wants two?
yeah, that's his wish list.
Okay, that changes my calculation.
And then the fire, all I did in there was added the dollar impact of the assistant chief position. So that one's pretty easy. Police, I added the salary amounts, as well as where we landed on for the vehicle. The boat repairs, I did update that from 15 to 18 based on a quote that the chief got after I prepared this original document. And then the body cams, I added that amount in. I just kept it for 2022 to not make it confusing and go out through the whole 5-year period.
What wasn't the vehicle more like 45? It was 30,000 for the vehicle and 15 for the upgrades to it.
Yeah,
That's what I
it-
thought.
okay, we can change that to 45.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd rather it be a little high than low and it comes back, oops.
Okay, not a problem. And Public Works, this is the one that got severely edited. Sarah just put the 4 bullet points in there that John kind of went through at the end of the study session last night. So we pared his 5-page list down to 4 bullets. And
Yeah, that works much better. And it
It's
tells you
not-
where the- tells
it's
you where
not that the other stuff's going away. It'll just be not part of the request discussion.
Right,
So-
right. That's where it got a little confusing because it's just, fixing everything, but not requesting anything. So,
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so that wraps up staff requests, and then we'll jump into, so this document will also be included in Monday's council agenda, and this is what we received from the council members. And this is under the other category. So Bob asked for summer fun. Eric, do you want to talk about your requests?
yeah, the fresh waterways, but we'll talk about that on Monday night. The city building improvement plan, we've been trying to get that ever since I've been on council and before, and I think it's could to hire a consultant to come in and do that. And they're actually, Aberdeen is going through that right now. I think they just started where they have a consultant and she's pretty good and can, and so I got that 125 is just kind of a placeholder based on what it's costing the city of Aberdeen to do it. But this way we need somebody to come in, and what that is just look at all of the city buildings, what condition they're in, and putting a report together going forward about what it would, which ones are desperate and need help, which ones are fine. But I know we've been asking for that for a really, really long time. So that's what that
And
is.
Eric, I 100% agree with you. I think it's an ideal project for like a consultant to come in, review our buildings, and then maybe even leave us with a plan for
Yeah.
that long-term maintenance.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That person comes in, and like I said, Aberdeen's going through it right now. And I actually happened to talk to the person that's doing it. So she seems very knowledgeable about, has been doing it for a long, long time. So rather than trying to get, the city or somebody to do it, I think just bringing in a consultant that knows what they're doing and can put a plan together. Otherwise, we just keep talking about it and nobody's ever going to have time to do it. So that's what that is. And then the part-time code enforcement, I'm not sure that I asked for an extra total 3, but I know we eventually need that. So I'm good with leaving that in, but that would be a long-term thing, probably not this year thing. And since, Nikki already wants to move that part-time to full-time, I'm in favor of that. But the third one would be, in the next budget if we could afford it, but not this year. or next year.
So do you think that we're gonna have to edit the staff request again? Do you want us to edit that one to just focus on 2022?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, the other thing I had thought about that Aberdeen does, and whether depends on, money, would be putting money into a fund, a low interest loan rate that Aberdeen does for the businesses to update the facades on their buildings. And I know Aberdeen actually does that, and it's been fairly successful with some of the buildings, and it, but that might be down the road a little bit too.
Okay. All right, I will just run through John's abatement funding, Boyhut Creek water flow improvement. Obviously, the police station and fire station are things that we're currently working on. So, Catherine.
And I really quickly, I'll speak to the abatement funding issue because it is becoming something that we haven't been using as much, but we're using it now. With Marshall here and sort of the new approach we've taken, and we're working with code enforcement to try to, abate some of these more problem facilities. We're doing it with 2 of them at the moment, one on Rain Street and one on Edgewood. They've already been filed by the city attorney for that. And the problem is that process costs money and we don't have a fund for it, so.
The good news is we do have an abatement fund.
A fund, but there's no, right. Go ahead.
Do you by chance know the dollar amount that you were thinking to add to that abatement fund? Had you guys talked about that? Because that's what Angie was trying to get on this list, was numbers with suggestions, and sounds like you guys have already talked about that. Do you have a number that we could add?
We do have money budgeted in that fund. We have $35,000 budgeted already.
Right.
We have another about 82,000 available to use. So I guess that would probably be a question for John on Monday.
Yeah.
But we do have some resources available for any immediate needs. And then if we want to budget more, we can also always do that.
Yeah.
We did an abatement initiative a couple of years ago and it turned out quite well.
Yeah, it worked. What is the cost of generally doing an abatement? Is about 80? I thought that last one was about $80,000 or something.
I was trying to remember what the one on Rain Street would have cost had we done a full abatement, and I think it would have exceeded the balance of the fund if I remember correctly. I don't remember the exact number. 80 might be correct, but I know it would have taken the fund down to a negative.
Yeah, but I think that's what it was back then, was about 80 grand. So if there's, you probably have to put like $100,000 in that fund just to be safe on how many if there's 2 that are being looked at right now.
Yeah, and if these are properties that we abate and take ownership of, I don't know what that looks like, but we usually put them back on the market and sell them and put money back into that fund to cover the costs.
Oh, okay. Oh, so that's why it takes so long, because the city's actually taking ownership of those properties.
And it's really complicated because in both these cases, with both of these properties, the people who are residing there are not even the legal owners. It's like they're families who are in other places that have, the power of attorney has been vested to some of their kids. It's in both cases, these are really complicated.
Right. Yeah, that's why it takes so long. But in that sense, though, once it does happen, those properties, once they're sold, could just self-fund the abatement program going forward. So, once there's a fund there, then going through the process, abating it, and then that money should just go back into that abatement fund once the property's sold, depending on how much it was sold for.
Yep, that's exactly how it would work.
Yep.
And that's how it worked with the proverbial blue house a few years ago that was the first one we abated. And then it was sold, and presumably the money went back into that fund.
Yep. We've done that. We purchased 1 or 2 at the county auction and abated them. And then, the proceeds went back into the fund. The proceeds back a few years ago weren't all that much, but the way property is selling now, I mean, it could be a lot of money.
Yep.
Right.
Cool.
Okay. All right. I think Catherine, if you want to speak to your list, that would
Sure.
be.
Sure. A couple of questions before I do, and
Okay.
on the Bob's council request was for $30,000 for the summer fund, but we already have that. Like 60 some thousand or almost 60,000 in that. I looked it up in parks for summer fun, right?
Yeah, let me look here.
Because it rolled over.
Yeah, we
They
didn't spend it
canceled
last
in
year.
2020, didn't spend it in 2020.
So we have 60,874 budgeted for 2 years.
So technically, that's not necessary, the 30,000. He just wants maybe to indicate that where he wants to move forward with it in this year.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my second question is, and I see that you didn't have this on the list, is a clarification on Nick's request for the maintenance to sewer collections. We already have that position in, we just don't have anybody in it, right? It's
Yeah.
already in the budget.
Yeah.
That's why
So
you didn't put it on the list.
we have, we need to replace Marshall Reed in that.
Right,
And so it's sitting as a Marshall Reed vacancy right now.
right. But if that fund, that's already funded for 22, 23, 21, 22.
Yeah, it'll be
Position's
part,
funded, but it just hasn't been filled.
basically what that is a cleanup. So we'll put that in the clean
Yeah.
list. It's not a request, it's just something we need to clean up.
Yeah,
Okay.
but don't you have to also add the, the 1 FTE that got missed for 2022? It's in 2021 is 5 FTEs, in 2022 there's 4, so that's got to be put back in, right?
Yep, that's the cleanup.
That's what it is.
Yes.
Right.
Had a million changes to the payroll forecast, so we basically did a complete overhaul of the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it'll all be coming forward, but that was part of that effort.
Yeah. So those were my 2 questions, although I did notice that when I went back to the budget on the sewer fund, that Nick had been contemplating adding 2 FTEs in his 21-22 request, budget request. We didn't add any, as I recall.
No,
You remember?
we didn't add any. Nope, just need to get his
We
20.
just need to get him back up to the 5.
Correct.
Yeah, and right now he's at 4.
Correct.
Right, okay, that's what I thought. So on mine, I sort of did a justification and I did amounts on all of them. Eric, I'm happy to know that you and I agree $200,000 on the fresh waterways is like a good start.
Yep.
I did my assumption based on last month's financial summary, which we had a 2,020,000 more than our 2 million reserve. So that's the first line. And I would like to see us create a new BARS code for the fresh waterways. And that could either be in a new storm drain capital replacement fund, or put that $200,000 as a placeholder in the capital improvement fund 301, or create a new line is a third option in 438 that would be fresh waterways maintenance or something. So the preference would be it had its own capital replacement fund, like the water replacement fund and the sewer replacement fund. And then we could really focus in and we could run expenses and spending and track those. That would be my preference. But I was thinking about 3 ways that we could do that.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's what that one is. Sorry, Eric.
No, that's okay. I mean, then right now, I think it's just the numbers. And then once we say yay or nay to the numbers, where that actually goes is kind of a secondary thing. but I agree making a separate fund for it, but I don't think that, yeah.
Right, right. And then the next one, all of these are from the general fund. The next one was, you all know that I've been beating the drum that we don't want a lid to replace our aging out water pipes. So I wanted to put a $300,000 into the Water Capital Improvement Fund and dedicate that to starting a water pipe replacement program. And incidentally, I asked for 300,000 also from the ARPA funding, because it's clear that we can use it for water replacement, that ARPA funding. So that would give us a total of $600,000, which I think would be a huge start. We start at the north end where the pipes are oldest and move out. But that addresses that asbestos that's in the pipes and the aging that the water report from 2016 indicated was like, it's going to be time to replace these pipes at some point. And the third one is I'd like to see us put in $400,000 for a permanent restroom at Chinook Park. We've talked about restrooms at the different parks. Wouldn't have to be fancy. Maybe something like is the one that the community club has at Bill Ellis Park, or the one at North Bay Park. But I'd like to see us start that I figured, as I recall, Councillor Connery was assigned to do some checking on that, and she came up with the $400,000. So I thought that was a good place. And then $400,000 to capital improvement for the new police station. So that we're dedicating funding for that. That's a total of 1.3 million. Out of that, somewhere around 1.8 million extra that we have. So it still leaves us about 500,000 that could either go to increase the reserve to 2.5 thousand, or for, sort of, we're not really sure how much these things are going to cost, but it's a start. Yeah. And then I'd really like to see us create a new department with its own code, and it'd be Parks and Recreation Services, that we could put in the fresh waterways in there. That's a recreation. We could put in parks in there. That's a recreation. And then we could track revenues and expenses for upkeep of the waterways in the parks. I think that asking the volunteers, particularly for the fresh waterways, I think you'd agree with me, Eric, on this one. There's not a lot of them, and they're getting older. And at some point, we need to say parks are back, put fresh waterways with parks. I understand there at one time, Angie, maybe you know this, was there a separate department for parks at one time? There was a coordinator, a volunteer coordinator.
Yeah, we have a parks budget set up in the general fund. So I was going to comment that these are funded two different ways. So Parks and Recreation is a general fund funding source, and we already have a budget set up budget set up for that. And then Waterways is actually a utility fund. So you combine both of them.
Yeah,
right. So that's what I would like to do, is see us create a new code where we could combine those two and then figure out a way of sort of putting the funds into it, whether it's a transfer in, transfer out from general fund, or whatever it is, so that we can really get in touch and really muckle on to what we want to do for that recreation. I think ARPA funding, I think from what I've seen from the webinars I've done, there's a lot of cities that are doing parks and recreation out of ARPA funding, because the encouragement is to get out in the outdoors. And I think we could use some ARPA funding, although I didn't put any in for parks in my requests for ARPA.
Okay.
the stormwater, the problem, if you take waterways and put it into a recreation thing, you would probably have a hard time using stormwater utility rates to now pay for a recreational service as opposed to a
Yeah.
utility service. So putting
Yeah.
waterways into a recreation, then you'd have to pay for waterways out of the general fund, which is going to be an insane amount of money. Where if it stays in the utility stormwater drainage, then you have that utility fee going forward that can continue to support, cleaning up the waterways and stuff like that. And Parks and Recs, I'm on the Parks board right now, and they have a pretty, I'm the liaison, not on the board, but they have a pretty decent budget, and they're really starting back up, getting ready. They have some momentum with people in there. If now we go and, change the whole thing, I'm not sure. The main thing, whatever with Parks and Rec, I agree we should have the recreation service, but I don't think we can put waterways into a Parks and Recreation department, or you're paying for it out of the general fund.
Yeah, we can't do that. So here's some suggestions for you. Going back up to, there's a couple options we have. We can't combine Parks and Rec, like Eric said, and the storm, because that's a general fund service versus a utility service. So we can't charge rates to pay for general fund stuff. That's just, we can't do that. But what we can do, up in your notes, towards the top there, it would be possible to create a storm drain capital fund. It would actually be a 400 series fund, similar to the water and sewer ones. So that 400 series fund would be a utility capital replacement fund, which we could use to fund with rates.
Mhm.
Or we could, like we did with the radio station, we just created a whole new department within the general fund. And we could do that within the storm drain fund and create a fresh waterways department.
Yep.
Which would probably be the easiest thing to do.
Yep.
Because then all of our revenue just goes into that fund as a whole, and then we can divvy it out how we want to within each line within that fund. So
Yep.
And
there's,
that's why I was sort of noodling through the options, because I don't know what all of those options are, but
yeah.
to be
So,
able to track them separately is really the goal.
so essentially what it would look like is, if you look what we did with the radio station in the general fund,
Yeah,
we could do that with storm drain and just label it fresh waterways and isolate that budget specifically for that purpose.
Yeah.
and then it'd be easier to track the expenses as well as the in the revenue or the
Yep.
fees that would go into that. the
Yeah,
portion.
basically the revenue, all the storm drain revenue would go into that fund, and then we would spend it accordingly, however you have it budgeted. But we can definitely break that out line by line, whatever you want to see in there, we can definitely do that. But yeah, like Eric said, we can't combine Parks and Rec and fresh waterways, because it's two different types of funding, and we can get in real trouble for that. So
Okay, so for Parks and Rec then, I know that there's a line in the general fund. I just looked at it this morning when I was trying to figure out whether the $30,000 was already in there for the summer fund program. So, but that doesn't track out expenses. It just tracks what we put in there. Is that not right? Am I,
Yeah.
No, that's-
you know what I'm saying? And
it's
Yeah, how-
expenses.
Go ahead. Yeah, how it works is the Public Works pretty much does all the work, because I was talking to Nick at our last board meeting we just have, and they track the expenses, but that $850,000 biennium budget, the majority of that is paid back to Public Works for taking care of the park. So the park board doesn't actually do any physical work. They just oversee it, but when they need the work, then they go to Public Works, and Nick comes, that's for watering the parks and mowing the parks and upkeep of the parks and the cleaning the that's all done by, there's no specific department of Parks and Rec in the Public Works. They just do all the work and then charge it to that budget.
well, and that's my, I don't know if issue is the right thing, is that it sort of gets buried within all of the work that Nick does. And first off, I don't know if you guys sensed it, but I sense that Nick is pretty stressed. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate. And we continue to add things without adding a dedicated person. And I do know that before the crash in 2008, there was a parks volunteer coordinator that did this stuff. And that's why I'm thinking if we had a new department, so put aside the fresh waterways, I get that. But if we had a separate, not only funding mechanism, but way to track, even if one of Nick's people were reassigned, or we at some point hired a part-time, temporary, or part-time, or did some of this consulting service that we want to do out of the fund so that we can really see where that's going. That's one of the, I think that's one of the transparency issues that people get into, that citizens get into, that quite frankly don't understand a 200-page budget. Does that make sense, Angie?
Well, I would have you look in the budget book at pages 172, 73, and I think this will answer all of your questions.
I got it right here. 172.
Yeah.
Hey, Angie, one thing, because I do agree real quick while she's looking with Catherine, and I didn't put it there, but one thing I would ask at the beginning is we should raise our general fund rate from $2 to $2.5 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that would be a main ask, that we need to keep raising our general fund balance so we get it back up there.
Okay, I found the budget. So yeah, North Canal. So we still have the 25,000 for North Canal restoration.
Yep.
Yeah. And what we
And
do,
19 for Scotch broom removal.
yeah, within the budget, we try to, when there's specific line items, I know that council's asked in the past, like, let's have a new line item for North Canal Park. So we can do that at any given time. We try our best in the budget itself to outline on that summary page to what the specific projects are, but you'll see this parks budget has salaries and benefits charged in there, just basic
Right.
operating supplies. We created a line for summer fun. So I think this is what you're looking for. It's just, I guess you could point people in that direction.
Okay, so we could, at some point, and I'm not putting this in my budget requests right now, but at some point, we could do a Parks and Recreation Director who was a volunteer coordinator, and possibly even do 50% of the salary in Parks and Recreation and 50% of the salary come from this new stormwater, fresh waterways line in the storm drain fund. Am I right with that?
Yeah, it depends on how you set up the job description. I know that Nick is charged to like 6 different places, just based, so we would just set it up accordingly. It really is driven by the job description and what this person would be doing. We just want to make sure we're not charging like a utility person to the general fund or vice versa. You need to define their roles accordingly.
Right. So the rest of my list was ARPA funding, and I don't know if you want to talk about that now or if there's an opportunity to talk about it later, or if people have questions about what I put in there. Eric, you and I agreed last time we talked about this on electric. You thought electric car charging stations was.
Yeah, I don't know if we can use it. I'm not sure we can use it for that.
Sorry?
I'm not sure we can use it for that.
Well, it does have in there that electric car charging grid.
25 stations, that's a lot of stations.
So what I was thinking of is $150,000 And I did some research, and Boston Consulting Group did an article on this where they went through the costs. It was in 2019, end of 2019. And they said the costs for each station was about $5,800. So I started off with $150,000. Then I assumed 25 stations because it was $5,800. But I know that there are a lot of public-private partnerships that are going on right now. In fact, we came back from Oregon last year, and we stopped at a rest area, and there were actually EV charging stations right there that
Yep.
you just plug your little charge into. So I'm not sure that we need that many, but I started out with 150,000.
Yeah.
And we could put them at maybe at, you know, at the parks, certainly at the convention center, maybe at some of the malls where people would shop. So I started off with the amount.
Yeah, I know we put 3 stations in at our resort in Seaside last year, and it was $45,000 for 3. So I think that 5,800 is not very accurate.
Well,
Because I mean, if you already have the electrical infrastructure there to do it, maybe 5,800 just for the station, but it's the infrastructure there. You got to have the transformers and everything like that, which is pretty expensive.
right, so it may not be 25 stations, but as I said, I started off with 150,000. I'd be happy to share the article with you. It was pretty interesting.
No, I 5,800 is for I just know what they, you know, because I looked at it to get at the convention center, and it was about $30,000.
Right. So then the second one was $100,000. I was picturing a revitalized downtown grants where the businesses, rather than do a low-cost loan that you mentioned, that the businesses would actually apply for a grant for paint or upgraded signs or upgraded facades. I think in this case, we'd want to sort of set some standards, like, you know, I don't know what the standards would be for what the ultimate, how you would look down the road. But I thought $100,000 was a place to start. Again, then the 300,000, that's the same thing as I mentioned up in our general fund transfer to get started on a water pipe replacement program. I put in 200,000 I noticed John had cleaning up the Oyhut ditch. I'm picturing, I think you, Eric, said something about at one time putting culverts all the way along the Oyhut ditch, covering them over and then using those for parking for each side of those businesses.
Yeah, not culverting the whole ditch, but at where like at you know, Playtime Family Fun, where you can put parking, but not the whole ditch. I was just envisioning cleaning out the whole ditch from, you know, up at the north end all the way down to the North Grand Canal Park. But that's you're talking probably, you know, $500,000 and $900,000 to do that whole ditch.
Well, and we don't know the amount, but
It would be expensive.
I'd love to see us clean the whole thing out and then cover all of it over, all the way from 115 to Chancellomer. So we don't have to deal with trash floating down and weeds growing out. It becomes a full culvert. I don't know how much it costs. I just threw that number in there. I'm not
that's a great idea.
guy.
Yep, good idea.
And then the rest of it leaves about 158,000 that I just recommend for retention for possible state or local matching funds. We know we can't use it for federal, and then reserves for cost estimate overrun. So if 200,000 doesn't get us where we wanted to go on the Oyhut ditch, we've got 158,000 for a little bit. I don't know. I usually want to do a little over protection, I guess. So that's it.
Cool.
Okay, so Going on to the next sheet, Scott, I had a question that's kind of overlapping. Some of the stuff on Catherine's list is on the general council list of the 26 items, but I know you,
Yes.
Sarah Bisson, are working on going through these line by line to say yes or no, we can't do these.
Yes, and Brent and I have a meeting, Sarah and I have a meeting tomorrow, in which we're gonna go through these. We've all kind of looked at them, but I just want the city attorney's final opinion on each of them before we move forward to make sure that it's not going to be an issue. And once we have that, if you want, I will send it back to you and just say, these are the ones that we know are a hard no that can't be funded. And then I'll put anything that's sort of in brackets that sort of falls in, maybe depending on how we did it, sort of categories, and then also then the ones that we know for sure we can.
Yeah, I was just gonna recommend that you add Catherine's list to this list, just to make sure we capture all of them.
I
No,
think
that-
all of mine are on this list. I looked at the list. I could be wrong, but I looked at the list and said, what are my top 4 priorities on here? And that's where I pulled it from. So aging water pipes,
Yeah.
boy hut ditch,
Electric cars, I see.
electric cars, and the revitalized downtown, the matching grant, there's one in there on small business finances, I guess, was revitalized for me, number 11.
So we could probably say small business finances, like in parentheses, loans.
Grants or loans.
Grants or
That was the
loans.
100,000 loan.
Okay,
I would push for grants, but because I think a low interest loan is a little bit more difficult. A program is a little more difficult to administer. And, these businesses have been suffering. They've been doing the best they can, but cities and counties all over the place are granting funds for some of the things we're talking about. I don't know why we would, maybe a supplemental loan, like we give them a $10,000 grant to put a new sign up, paint their building and upgrade their facade. And if they need more, then it could go into a low interest loan. But there's this SBA is doing some of that stuff. I don't know that we have to do that also.
yeah. And I would just throw out there that we don't necessarily have the resources in the finance department to run a loan program.
Right.
Right.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so we'd have to consider that might be a new position or something if we decide to do that. But I can tell you right now, we don't have anybody available to run anything like that.
Yep.
I think it takes a specific skill set too, that.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
I like the grant program. That's a good idea.
The grants would be easier to manage.
Yep.
If allowable, of course.
Yeah.
Can I
Well,
ask
we're
a
sure
quick
doing it
question?
in Walla Walla and the towns that were on that webinar. They figured it out. Seattle's doing some grants right now.
Nice. Sarah, you have a question?
I do. On the top portion, this portion of the ARPA list, which was your top priorities,
Yeah,
out of the 900 and so on thousand that we have to spend over the next 4 years or have it committed to 2 years, how much does all of these top priorities
they
eat
come up
up?
to, the 4 add to up to 750,000. And that leaves 158,000, like I said, for, just in case types of things, reserves for cost estimate overruns or retention for state and local matching funds, which was, I think, on that list, number 5, state local matching funds on our, I don't have it in front of me right now,
Yeah.
on the list that you just showed us, that you scrolled up from.
So basically, it looks like there's 4 asks, and then the rest would just sit in the fund.
Right, until we, council decided, okay, or just as a sort of thinking
Yeah.
about possibilities. Oil
Sure.
ditch costs, we want to do it, but we find out it costs 300,000. So that'd that would come out of that reserve for cost estimate overruns that 158,000. So to drop it down to 58,000. Or we can find grants for building electric charging stations from the state of Washington. So we can drop that 150,000 to 75,000 and put that 75,000 back into that retention fund. So I just didn't want to spend right up to the limit, because my feeling is that then I get in trouble. I don't want to write a check that's gonna bounce. I always like to have a lot of money at the bottom line of my balance in my checking account.
I can appreciate that.
I'm sure you do too. Your checking account is a lot bigger than mine.
Okay,
Does that make sense then, what I
yeah,
suggested? Okay. Those are just mine. I mean,
Okay.
everybody's probably, all 7 of us could go through this and say, I want 3 and 5 and 8,
Yep.
and we're gonna vote on them.
that
So,
would be what council gets to do on Monday. So,
oh goody, that's gonna be a long meeting.
probably. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to property taxes. Amazing news all around on property taxes. So I just added in this packet what will be in Monday's council agenda as well. The big takeaways are, I did get some very draft numbers from the assessor's office. And I want to say very draft because he said very draft. So these aren't final by any means, but his best guess last week, I think when I talked to him, was that our assessed value was going up from a little over 1.5 billion
Wow.
or 1.8 billion. So that's huge. It's a huge,
1.5 to 1.8.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? So I used his estimates to kind of calculate what our levy rates would look like, because as you know, when that assessed value goes up, our levy rates go down. So it's good news for the homeowners when those levy rates go down because you're paying less per thousand. However, if your value of your property goes up, it might be a wash. So it all depends.
Always seems to be.
Yeah.
Bad news, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're expecting the levy to go from, so the general fund levy would go from about 3.2 million to about 3.45 million. And the big contributing factor there is obviously our new construction, which has been just record breaking. So the EMS levies down at the very bottom. So you'll remember we voted yes on that, and that levy will reset at 50 cents. So that one is going from about 565,000 to 911,000. So that's a huge increase as well. And if, Sarah, if you go on to the next page, that's where all this stuff is shown, that kind of the comparisons
Oh,
from
that's,
year to
that's better.
the new ones, yeah. So I trend it usually out 5 years to kind of show what our levies have been. Another really good news item for taxpayers is that waste treatment bond is falling off in 2022, which is a huge number. So if you scroll over a little bit more, you'll see that that one's zeroed out. And actually on the next page, it shows the effect of that levy going away all the way over to the right. So you'll see that, you know, we just use 220,000 home value because we've always used that. But you'll see with that levy falling off that if your home is valued at 220,000, your tax bill would be going down about $278 a year, which is about $23 a month. So even though our general one is, you know, we're getting more money in, the levy rates are going down. The EMS levy rate actually went up because it reset, but then that debt coming off kind of offset it all to have some pretty big cost savings. So it's really good, all good. Couldn't be here.
So Angie, if I can ask just to clarify, even though the EMS levy resets back to 50 cents. It's the amount that would be assessed for the $220,000 home would still go down because it's spread over such a significantly wider group funding mechanism.
The reason people will see a decrease is due to that bond coming off. So that's gonna be because the general one came down a little bit, the EMS one came up, but the big thing was that bond coming off because it was well over $1 per thousand. So that's gonna,
So, I'm sorry. So Sarah, could you go back to that sheet? Because what I wrote down was in 2020, what I thought was the EMS levy would have been $67, and in 2021, $44. Did I get that wrong?
so on the very okay, yeah, we're here.
Oh, wait, 2022, 21 and 22.
Yeah.
So that last line. Yes. Is that not the EMS levy then?
The middle one above, so the basic is the first one. See, okay, so if we're looking at 2021, the basic general fund levy is the $477.35.
Right.
The $82.60 is the EMS levy.
Okay.
So if you go over, you'll see that since that levy reset at 50 cents, that one's actually going up for property owners.
Okay. So I was looking at the highlighted line.
Yeah, that's total. So that's your total tax bill.
And what's the very bottom line?
That's just per month. So it's per year and then per month.
Okay, great. Got it.
Yeah, and this is all on the sheet. It's just hard with this because you can't see the whole thing at once, but yeah.
Right,
So
right,
stuff's over on the left.
right. Got it.
Yep. And like I
All
said
good.
before, Monday's meeting is the first reading. I don't recommend approving any of this because we don't have final numbers. And until we get that from the county, we just want to kind of hold tight. So
I honestly think that our sort of unsaid agreement, or maybe agreement, that we don't pass something on the first reading unless it's a huge emergency, has worked out really well for us. I
Well,
totally
yes.
support keeping the second reading going. It just keeps things
Well-
cleaner. People can anticipate, well, I've got one more time to make a comment if I'm a public person who happens, like I think of Mr. Williams, who always would make a comment, but he wasn't at the budget session last night. I have no idea why, but
He might
I
be
bet
in
it was
Arizona.
because he had something that was a big conflict, so he would have a second opportunity,
or
or a
he's in
second
Arizona.
reading, or third or fourth.
yeah, we are actually going to have a public hearing on the property taxes, 2 public hearings on the budget modification, as well as public comment on the budget modification ordinances, which we'll do twice, as well as public comment on the property tax ordinances, which we'll do twice. So it's got to be getting close to 10 opportunities to public comment.
Somebody should be able to make at least one.
Yeah, exactly. And then we will also, I know Sarah was making notes on the few adjustments that we're going to make to those lists. We'll make sure those new versions get posted on File Pro as well, so that people can see those before Monday.
Okay.
I think that's all I have. Scott, the mayor isn't here to do a report. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
No, not on the finance side, but I've got a couple of things that relate to this that I will bring up in the next city administrator report.
Can I just say one other thing? You have something you want to relate, Scott?
No, not at this moment, no.
Okay. I think we want to be mindful. 2 things on this budget is that a lot of our surplus is because of unfilled positions, particularly in the police department. I know we know that, but it's always helpful to remind ourselves. And when we're filling permanent positions, at least in my worldview, we're kind of making almost, I don't want to say it's a promise, but we're telling somebody, upend your life change your job, change your life, come to work for us. So I think we have a certain moral responsibility to make sure that we don't make decisions about permanent ongoing positions lightly. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that. Eric, you hire people all the time.
Yep.
You know, that was a big thing for us. We didn't, at Fred Meyer, we didn't hire people just for the summer unless they knew clearly it was just for the summer and that's what they wanted because they were going back to college. We
Right.
just didn't do that.
Right. The other caveat to that from my perspective is in 2008, a lot of these positions that we're talking about were taken out. And
Yes.
and the city now, from a staffing perspective, has, the city has exploded, but we haven't really given many of those positions back. And we want to be very careful at which ones and how we give that back, but they need the support, or it's just, we'll start losing people because they're going to get burned out.
Yeah.
So you got to balance up, you got to balance not overspending, but at the same time staffing to what the needs of the city are. Because otherwise, if you don't have quality staff in the city, it's not okay.
No, absolutely. And I'd be curious, I know we're at about 100, somewhere between 100 and 105 employees right now, I think.
I think we just looked 94. I think
2008.
94. I think we're at
94.
94.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm curious what we would have been in 2008.
Well,
I just
no-
also want to clarify something because I keep hearing the police department and staffing and stuff. There's only one vacancy for patrol and there's only one vacancy for that part-time at 24,000. So I keep hearing that from various council members that, the money for staffing we have because the police department, that has diligently been worked through and they only have one vacancy. And I
Right.
believe, Angie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the position that would be paid out of 3/10. So I just want to clarify that because we keep getting this, the police department doesn't have all their staffing and all their staffing. They only have one vacancy that's paid out of 3/10. They're fully staffed for
Yeah.
what they've been given permission to hire for,
Yeah.
other than that 3/10 position. So I just wanted to
And
clarify
then,
that.
and then there's 3 more positions that Nikki would like based on this new police reform laws that passed. As I remember when she did her presentation, she said she thinks.
You wanted
Good.
one
3 more
administrative
people.
assistant and 2.
Well, I know she wants that, but I mean down the road, she's talking
Yeah.
about the,
Right now in this
Cool.
moment,
Yeah.
they only have that one 3/10 position and the part-time $24,000 position that's vacant.
oh, that's good to know.
Yep.
All right. I think I'm good. Anybody else have anything?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Well, I'll see you Monday.
All right.
Right.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Yep. See you Monday.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
weekend, you all.